On a bright and cheerful afternoon in Sunnyvale Park, Clara was enjoying her favorite pastime, gardening. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting playful shadows on the ground as she tended to her vibrant flower beds. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Roses, daisies, and sunflowers bloomed in a riot of colors, filling the air with their sweet fragrance. Clara loved the way the flowers brightened her yard and brought joy to the people who passed by. It was a place where children laughed, families gathered, and neighbors chatted over white picket fences. Just as she was about to prune a particularly stubborn rose bush, a loud rustling noise broke the peaceful ambience of the park, causing her to look up. Startled, she squinted against the sun, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of the sudden disturbance. The sound grew louder, and before she could react, a massive falcon swooped down from the sky, its wings spread wide, casting a shadow over her garden. It landed gracefully on her porch railing with a thud that sent her heart into her throat. Clara had never seen such a large bird up close. It was majestic, with sharp talons and piercing eyes that seemed to survey the area with a mix of curiosity and purpose. She stood frozen in place, a mix of awe and concern coursing through her veins. What on earth is a falcon doing here? She wondered aloud, her voice barely a whisper. As she cautiously approached the porch, the falcon's beak caught the sunlight, glinting ominously. Clara's instincts kicked in, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. Was the bird lost? Injured? Or was it hunting for something? Her mind raced with questions. And then, she noticed something peculiar. The falcon was clutching a small object tightly in its talons. Her heart dropped as panic surged through her. What if it's something dangerous, she thought, recalling the stories she had heard about wildlife becoming aggressive when cornered. Clara instinctively took a step back, her breath catching in her throat as she fumbled for her phone. The idea of facing a wild bird was overwhelming, and her mind raced with scenarios. Would it attack her? Would it defend its prize? As she dialed 911, her hands trembled with both fear and excitement. I need to call the cops, she muttered, her voice shaky, realizing that the situation could be more serious than she had anticipated. The falcon's presence felt ominous, and Clara's heart raced as she pressed the call button, her mind filled with worry about what this could mean for her peaceful afternoon in the park. The dispatcher's calm voice broke through her racing thoughts, asking for details about the emergency. Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself as she explained the unusual situation. There's a massive falcon on my porch, and it has something in its talons. I'm not sure what to do. The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way, but as Clara hung up, the sense of urgency in her heart grew stronger. Please don't hurt anyone, she whispered, glancing nervously at the falcon. The bird seemed to sense her fear, its sharp eyes locked onto hers as if trying to communicate. A moment later, the falcon shifted its weight, and Clara gasped as she caught a glimpse of what it was holding, a small, plush toy. Relief flooded over her as confusion took its place. Is that a toy? She wondered aloud, her mind racing to piece together how a stuffed animal had ended up in the clutches of a wild bird. The tension that had filled her chest began to ease, replaced by a strange mixture of amusement and concern. How could a falcon have gotten hold of a toy? As she pondered this, she heard the distant sound of sirens approaching, signaling the arrival of the authorities. Clara stepped back from the porch, allowing the adrenaline to dissipate just a bit. What would the police think of this? She could imagine their expressions, disbelief, perhaps even amusement, at the thought of a falcon stealing a toy. Would they find it funny, or would they take it seriously? The thoughts swirled in her head as the sirens grew louder. Would the falcon remain calm, or would it fly away before help arrived? As she waited, Clara watched the majestic bird with newfound fascination. It was beautiful, powerful, and for a moment, she was captivated by its grace and strength. When the police car pulled up, Clara felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. Officer Johnson, a local cop she recognized from the neighborhood, stepped out. What's going on? He asked, eyeing the falcon perched confidently on her railing. Clara gestured toward the bird, unsure of how to explain the bizarre situation. "There's a Falcon, and it has a toy," she exclaimed, the words tumbling out in a rush. Officer Johnson raised an eyebrow, suppressing a grin as he stepped closer. "A toy, huh? That's unusual," he said, glancing at the Falcon. As he approached, the Falcon shifted slightly, still clutching the toy but eyeing the officer with curiosity. "You sure it's safe?" Clara asked nervously, watching as Officer Johnson slowly reached for the bird. "Yeah, they usually won't bother you unless they feel threatened," he replied, his voice calm. "But let's see what's going on here." Clara held her breath, her heart racing as she watched Officer Johnson kneel down, attempting to get a better look at the Falcon. "All right, buddy, what do you have there?" he murmured, leaning closer. The Falcon fluffed its feathers, shifting its weight slightly as if deciding whether or not to relinquish its prize. "Come on, you can't keep that forever," Officer Johnson coaxed, his tone soothing. Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie as she watched the officer interact with the majestic bird. It was as if they were engaged in a dance, a moment of connection between human and animal. Just then, another voice interrupted the scene. "What's going on here?" Clara turned to see a wildlife officer stepping onto her porch, a concerned expression on his face. "I got a call about a Falcon in distress. Is everything okay?" Clara explained the situation, her voice filled with a mix of anxiety and relief. The wildlife officer nodded, his gaze shifting from the Falcon to the toy it clutched tightly. "Looks like he's taken a liking to that stuffed animal," he said with a chuckle. "We see this sometimes. Birds can get curious and pick up strange objects." Clara couldn't help but laugh, her earlier fears melting away. "I thought it might be something dangerous," she admitted, her heart finally beginning to settle. The wildlife officer approached the Falcon cautiously, and with a few gentle coaxing words, the bird finally released the toy, letting it fall softly onto the porch. "There we go," he said with a smile, holding out his hand. "You're free to go now." The Falcon hesitated for just a moment before taking flight, soaring gracefully into the blue sky above. As the tension in the air dissipated, Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you all for coming so quickly," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I didn't know what to do." Officer Johnson chuckled, brushing off her concern. "You did the right thing by calling us. We're glad everything turned out okay." As the officers exchanged a few more words, Clara felt a renewed sense of community and connection. She had turned a potentially dangerous situation into an opportunity to come together with her neighbors and local authorities. The experience had shifted her perspective, reminding her of the importance of looking out for one another. "Do you often see wildlife around here?" Clara asked, genuinely curious. Officer Johnson nodded. "It's not uncommon for birds to wander into residential areas, especially if they're looking for food. Just keep an eye out, and if anything seems off, don't hesitate to call." "Will do," Clara replied, feeling grateful for their advice and support. As they wrapped up their conversation, she picked up the plush toy that had been dropped, feeling a sense of relief and accomplishment. It was just a silly stuffed animal, but it had played a significant role in this unexpected adventure. As the officers prepared to leave, Clara waved goodbye, watching as they walked back to their patrol car. The sun continued to shine down on the park, and the world felt a little brighter. She couldn't shake the feeling that this day would be remembered as a turning point, a reminder of the importance of community and the kindness that could emerge from even the most surprising situations. Once the officers were gone, Clara turned to her yard, now feeling different after the whirlwind of events. She took a deep breath and smiled, appreciating the beauty around her. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just a yard, it was a place where life and stories intertwined. With the excitement of the day still bubbling inside her, Clara decided to share the story of the Falcon with her friends and neighbors. She pulled out her phone and began typing a message to the neighborhood group chat, eager to recount the unusual incident. "You won't believe what happened today," she typed, her fingers flying across the screen. "A massive falcon landed on my porch and had a toy. The police came to help, and it turned into quite the adventure." As she hit send, Clara felt a rush of anticipation. She knew that her neighbors would be intrigued and would want to come by and hear the full story in person. After all, everyone loved a good tale, especially one involving wildlife and unexpected heroes. The responses started coming in almost immediately. "No way. That's amazing," one neighbor replied. "Can't wait to hear more," another added. Clara couldn't help but grin at their excitement. It was moments like these that reminded her how connected they all were and how sharing stories could bring everyone closer together. Inspired by the positive reactions, Clara decided to host a small gathering in her backyard the following weekend. She envisioned a cozy afternoon where friends could come over, enjoy some snacks, and share their own stories about wildlife encounters. Maybe they could even turn it into a regular event, celebrating nature and fostering community bonds. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue across her garden, Clara felt a sense of fulfillment. The day had started with uncertainty, but it had transformed into something beautiful and meaningful. She took a moment to appreciate the stillness of the evening, the gentle rustling of the leaves, and the chirping of birds settling in for the night. With renewed energy, Clara began tidying up her garden, reflecting on how the Falcon's brief visit had opened up new possibilities. Life had a way of surprising her, and she was learning to embrace those surprises, knowing they could lead to unexpected adventures and connections. Tomorrow would be another day filled with possibilities, and Clara was ready for whatever came next. As she finished up her gardening, she couldn't help but glance up at the sky, imagining the falcon soaring high above, free and wild. "Thank you for the adventure," she whispered to the fading light, knowing that every moment in life was precious and worthy of celebration. As Clara waited anxiously for help, her mind flooded with memories that shaped her passion for wildlife and her commitment to protecting animals. Clara had always been fascinated by nature. Growing up in a small town surrounded by lush forests and serene lakes, her childhood was filled with adventures exploring the great outdoors. Every Saturday, she would tag along with her father, a dedicated conservationist, to the local nature reserve. He taught her everything he knew about the delicate balance of ecosystems and the importance of respecting every creature, no matter how small. When Clara was just 6 years old, she found a tiny, injured sparrow on the ground. It had fallen from its nest, its little wings fluttering helplessly. With her heart pounding in her chest, she carefully picked it up and brought it home, desperate to save it. Her father helped her create a safe space in a shoebox lined with soft cloth, and together, they researched how to care for injured birds. They fed the sparrow a mixture of seeds and water and made sure it had a warm place to rest. Clara watched in awe as her father's knowledge brought the little bird back to health. Eventually, they released it back into the wild, and the moment the sparrow took flight was etched into Clara's memory forever. She felt a profound sense of achievement and joy, knowing they had made a difference. Over the years, Clara became a familiar face at the local animal shelter, volunteering every chance she got. She loved caring for abandoned pets, helping with adoptions, and even organizing events to raise funds for the shelter. Her dedication earned her the respect of the staff and the community, who often praised her for her kindness and commitment. But it wasn't just dogs and cats that captured Clara's heart. She found herself drawn to all creatures, big and small. She would spend her evenings watching documentaries about wildlife, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian or a wildlife biologist. Despite her love for animals, Clara often faced challenges in her small town. The community was filled with people who didn't always understand her passion or the importance of protecting wildlife. She frequently encountered the harsh realities of discrimination against certain animals, especially predators like foxes and hawks, which were often seen as threats to local pets or livestock. Clara found herself standing up for these creatures in conversations, trying to educate her friends and neighbors about their vital roles in the ecosystem. Every animal has its place, she would argue passionately, even if her words sometimes fell on deaf ears. When she decided to move back to Maplewood after college, Clara was determined to continue her mission of educating others about wildlife conservation. She organized workshops and nature walks for children, hoping to instill the same love for animals that her father had given her. However, as she settled back into her hometown, Clara quickly realized that old prejudices ran deep. While some embraced her ideas, others dismissed them, labeling her as overly idealistic. The tension between her passion and the community's attitudes often left her feeling isolated. On the day the Falcon landed in her yard, Clara had spent the morning tending to her vibrant garden, a project she had poured her heart into since moving back. Flowers bloomed in a riot of colors, and she took pride in knowing that her efforts attracted various birds and butterflies. Gardening was not just a hobby, it was her sanctuary, a place where she could connect with nature, away from the noise of the world. But as she bent over to prune the rose bushes, her mind was troubled with thoughts about the falcon and the potential dangers it faced in the area. Rising tension surrounded her as she remembered the news reports of local wildlife being harmed. A few weeks prior, she had read a heartbreaking story about a family of hawks that had been chased away from their nesting site. Local residents feared that the birds were preying on their pets, leading to their cruel displacement. Clara felt an ache in her heart, knowing that such fears were often unfounded. "People just don't understand," she muttered under her breath as she thought about how these beautiful creatures were often judged too harshly. Now, with the massive falcon perched on her porch, she couldn't help but feel a surge of urgency. Clara remembered the lessons her father taught her about animals' instincts and the importance of providing them a safe space. "I can't let anything happen to that bird," she resolved, determined to protect it from any potential harm, especially from those who might not understand its presence. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Suddenly, Clara noticed the falcon watching her intently. Its sharp eyes seemed to assess her, and she felt a connection forming between them. "What do you need?" she wondered aloud, her heart racing with the possibility that this magnificent creature might have a purpose in her life. The tension in the air crackled with anticipation, making her realize that this moment could change everything. As the falcon shifted its weight and let out a low screech, Clara's heart raced with a mix of fear and awe. It was a reminder that this was no ordinary encounter. She felt an instinctual need to protect the falcon, just as she had done with the sparrow years ago. "I need to figure out what's going on," she whispered to herself, feeling the urgency build inside her. Glancing around the neighborhood, Clara wondered who she could call for help. She hesitated for a moment, debating whether to contact animal control or the police. Would they see the falcon as a threat or something to be respected? The thought of them mishandling the situation made her stomach churn. As she paced back and forth, her mind racing with possibilities, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was significant. It was as if the falcon had chosen her for a reason, and she felt a deep responsibility to understand its presence. What if it had come to her for help? The thought intrigued and terrified her. With every passing second, the tension grew. Clara realized that she couldn't just stand there. She had to act quickly to ensure the safety of both the falcon and herself. Taking a deep breath, she finally reached for her phone, fingers trembling as she dialed the emergency number. "I need to report something unusual," she said, her voice steadying. "There's a massive falcon in my yard, and I'm not sure if it's injured or in danger." After hanging up, Clara stood by the window, watching the falcon as it preened its feathers. There was something majestic about the way it moved, a quiet grace that reminded her of the wild freedom that so many animals deserved. She couldn't help but admire its strength and beauty, even as worry gnawed at her insides. "Please be safe," she murmured, her heart full of hope and anxiety. The wait felt agonizing, each passing moment stretching into eternity as she pondered the implications of the falcon's arrival. Could this bird be a sign, a call to action in her life? The thought sparked a flicker of excitement. Clara realized she had been waiting for a purpose, a chance to make a real difference. Perhaps this was it. As she stood there, staring out at the falcon, Clara resolved that she wouldn't let fear dictate her actions. Whatever happened next, she would face it head-on. With renewed determination, she promised herself to learn everything she could about this incredible bird and to advocate for its safety. Little did Clara know, this encounter was just the beginning of a remarkable journey that would change her life forever. The Falcon, with its piercing eyes and powerful presence, had entered her world for a reason, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. With every heartbeat, Clara felt the excitement building within her. It was a turning point, a chance to connect deeply with nature once again. And as she watched the Falcon settle more comfortably on her porch, she couldn't shake the feeling that their fates were intertwined, setting the stage for an adventure that would unfold in ways she had yet to imagine. Clara's heart raced as she paced her living room, glancing out the window to check on the massive Falcon. It sat confidently on her porch railing, its sharp beak glinting in the afternoon sun, and those piercing eyes seemed to assess everything around it. She could hardly believe her eyes. A wild falcon had just landed in her yard. The initial shock was giving way to concern. What if the bird was injured or, even worse, aggressive? She had heard stories of birds attacking when they felt threatened. Clara picked up her phone, her hands trembling slightly as she dialed 911. This is not an emergency, she thought, but it felt urgent nonetheless. The operator answered on the first ring, her calm voice breaking through Clara's rising anxiety. 911, what's your emergency? I think I need help, Clara stammered, her voice shaky. There's a huge falcon on my porch, and I'm not sure what to do. It has something in its claws. Is anyone injured? The dispatcher asked, maintaining a professional tone. No, but I'm worried it might hurt someone if it feels threatened, Clara replied, glancing back at the falcon. It was still perched there, observing her every move. I don't know how long it's been here, but I don't want it to hurt itself or anyone else. Okay, ma'am. Just to clarify, you have a falcon in your yard? The dispatcher asked, a hint of disbelief in her voice. Clara could imagine the operator jotting down notes, probably chuckling softly to herself. Can you stay at a safe distance while we send someone out? Yes, I can do that, Clara said, trying to suppress the nervousness in her voice. I just don't want it to get hurt, and I want to know if it's okay. Help is on the way. Stay on the line if you need further assistance, the dispatcher said before Clara hung up, a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety washing over her. Clara took a deep breath, leaning against the wall for support. She never expected to have a falcon visit her yard, let alone have to call the police about it. It felt surreal, almost like a scene from a movie. She wondered how this situation had escalated to the point of needing a police officer. Her thoughts spiraled into worry about the bird's well-being and what could happen when the officers arrived. Would they know how to handle the falcon? Would they consider it a nuisance or a danger? While she waited, Clara decided to gather more information about the falcon and its behavior. She quickly grabbed her laptop and began typing. Her heart raced as she searched for what to do if a falcon is in your yard and scrolled through various articles. She learned that falcons are generally not aggressive unless provoked, and most are simply hunting for food or seeking shelter. But what had attracted this particular falcon to her yard? Was it looking for a place to rest, or was it hunting? Just then, Clara heard a faint noise coming from outside. She stepped back to the window, her heart racing again as she peered out. The falcon was preening itself, ruffling its feathers and shifting its weight. Clara's anxiety slowly began to fade, replaced by a sense of curiosity. She had never seen a falcon up close before. Its feathers were a magnificent mix of browns, whites, and streaks of deep red. She marveled at its grace, wishing she could appreciate this moment without the worry that had clouded her mind. Minutes felt like hours as Clara continued to wait for the officers to arrive. Finally, she heard the sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder as they approached her neighborhood. The sound sent another wave of anxiety through her. What would the officers think? Would they take her seriously? Clara paced back and forth, her mind racing with thoughts of how the encounter might unfold. When the police car finally pulled up outside her house, Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She rushed to the door and opened it, ready to explain everything. The officer stepped out, a tall man with a serious demeanor. He walked towards her, and Clara could see the skepticism in his eyes. "Ma'am, we received a call about a falcon. Can you tell me what's going on?" "There's a falcon on my porch," Clara said, gesturing towards the bird. I think it might be lost or in distress. It's just sitting there with something in its claws. She felt the need to explain further, but was unsure if the officer would even be interested in a bird that could easily fly away. The officer raised an eyebrow as he turned to look at the falcon, then back at Clara. A falcon, huh? I didn't think I'd be coming out for something like this today. I know it sounds strange, Clara continued, but I don't want it to get hurt or hurt anyone. Can you help? The officer sighed, glancing back at the falcon, who had now noticed the new arrival and was studying him intently. Let's see what we can do. Just stay back, all right? He took a cautious step toward the porch, his hand resting on his belt as if he were preparing for a potential confrontation with the wild bird. Okay, Clara said, backing up a few steps. Just be careful. She felt a surge of hope that the officer would know what to do. The falcon seemed to sense the officer's approach and shifted its weight, maintaining a firm grip on the object in its claws. Clara squinted to see better. It looks like it's holding something, she whispered, half to herself. Yeah, I can see that, the officer replied, kneeling down to get a better look. What do you think it is? I'm not sure. It could be something it caught or... Before she could finish, the falcon suddenly flapped its wings and took off, soaring into the air. Clara gasped as the bird flew higher, the object still clutched tightly in its talons. Oh no! Wait, she exclaimed, her heart sinking as the falcon disappeared over the trees. The officer stood up, his brow furrowed. Well, there goes that idea. I was hoping we could figure out what it was carrying. Clara felt a rush of disappointment. I didn't want it to fly away. I just wanted to help. Sometimes, animals can sense when they're being approached, he said. And they don't always react the way we hope they would. Do you think it was injured? Clara asked, biting her lip. I hope it's okay. I'm sure it's fine. They are incredibly resilient creatures, the officer replied, trying to reassure her. If it's meant to be, maybe it will return. But you did the right thing by calling us. Just as Clara was about to respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. She looked down to see a message from her neighbor, who had witnessed the falcon's dramatic exit. Did you see that? It just flew away with something. Clara typed back quickly, sharing the concern she felt about the falcon. As she was typing, the officer suddenly pointed to the ground. What's that? Clara turned her gaze, her eyes widening. Is that? They both stepped closer to the porch, where a small, brightly colored object lay abandoned in the grass. The officer crouched down to examine it. Looks like a toy, he said, picking it up. It's a stuffed animal. Clara exclaimed, recognition flooding over her. It must have belonged to a child. Interesting, the officer replied, holding the toy up for Clara to see. It seems the falcon took this while looking for food. Perhaps it mistook it for something else. The realization hit Clara hard. Oh no, I hope a child isn't missing their toy. She glanced around the neighborhood, feeling a sense of urgency. Let's see if we can track down its owner, the officer suggested, his tone now more serious. It might be helpful to find out if anyone reported a lost item. Clara nodded, her mind racing. I'll ask around the neighborhood. There are a lot of kids who play in this area. As they began walking together back to the street, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. I'm so glad I called you, she said to the officer, who was now holding the stuffed toy carefully. I can't believe all of this happened today. It's like a scene from a movie. Yeah, you don't see this every day, the officer chuckled. But it's important to keep an eye out for those kinds of things. You never know what might happen next. Do you think the falcon will come back? Clara asked, glancing up at the sky. Possibly. They're creatures of habit, especially when they find a place they like, he replied. But it could be on the hunt for food elsewhere now. Let's just hope it doesn't make a habit of snatching toys. With that, they continued walking through the neighborhood, stopping to speak with several families. Clara explained the situation and showed them the stuffed toy, asking if anyone recognized it. Some children joined the search, their faces filled with excitement at the prospect of a mystery to solve. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Clara felt a deep sense of connection with her community. She realized that this unexpected encounter with the Falcon had brought everyone together, sparking a sense of camaraderie as they all pitched in to help. Just then, a young girl named Emily, who lived a few houses down, approached with a worried expression. "Is that my unicorn?" she asked, pointing at the stuffed toy in the officer's hand. Clara's heart raced. "Is it? Do you recognize it?" "Yes," Emily exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "I lost it this morning when I was playing in the yard." The officer smiled, handing the toy to Emily. "Looks like your friend has been found." Emily hugged the stuffed unicorn tightly, relief flooding her face. "Thank you so much. I thought I'd never see it again." Clara watched the joyful reunion, feeling a sense of fulfillment. "I'm so glad we could help," she said to Emily, who beamed with gratitude. As the evening continued, Clara felt a mix of emotions. What had started as a frightening encounter with a falcon had transformed into a heartwarming community moment. She realized that sometimes, unexpected situations could lead to wonderful outcomes, uniting people in ways she had never imagined. As she said goodbye to Officer Daniels and Emily, Clara felt a renewed appreciation for her neighborhood. She knew that the Falcon's brief visit would become a cherished story, one that would be told for years to come, a story of adventure, community, and the unexpected joy that could arise from the most unusual circumstances. Walking back to her porch, Clara felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had faced the unknown, and in doing so, had strengthened her ties with her neighbors. She smiled to herself, already looking forward to the next adventure that awaited her. Just as Clara's heart began to settle from the rush of calling 911, the Falcon shifted its weight, its wings slightly unfurling. A small rustle caught her attention, and she leaned forward, squinting to get a better view. The Falcon's sharp beak gleamed in the sunlight as it repositioned the object in its talons. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she realized what it was, a small, plush toy that appeared to be a faded teddy bear. The tension in her chest eased, replaced by a mixture of confusion and amusement. A toy? Is that what all the fuss was about? She wondered aloud, her disbelief morphing into laughter. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. What had initially felt like a moment of crisis now seemed absurdly funny. She chuckled at the thought of a massive bird with a soft, stuffed toy, imagining how the Falcon must have come across it. Perhaps it was on a mission to rescue its new friend, or, more likely, it had simply been curious. Clara's mind began to race with possibilities, each more whimsical than the last. Could the Falcon have been a guardian of this toy, ensuring it was kept safe? Or perhaps, in a moment of playful folly, it had swooped down to claim its prize. Just as she was contemplating the bird's intentions, she heard the distant sound of sirens approaching. Her laughter quickly faded, replaced by a sense of urgency. The reality of the situation flooded back in. Even though it was just a toy, the Falcon's presence still posed questions. Why had it come here, and what was the story behind the plush toy? Clara took a deep breath to steady herself. It was one thing to find a bird in the yard, it was another to involve the police, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. As the sirens drew closer, Clara's heart began to race again. Would the officers think she was overreacting? Would they see the humor in the situation, or would they dismiss her concerns? She could already envision the officers rolling their eyes as they arrived to see her standing there, talking to a Falcon over a toy. "I'm sure this isn't what they expect to deal with today," she muttered to herself, shaking her head in disbelief. Before she could dwell on her anxiety, the police car pulled up to the curb, lights flashing but sirens turned off, giving a gentle warning that they had arrived. A uniformed officer stepped out, a tall figure with a serious expression. Officer Martinez approached, his eyes scanning the yard with professional scrutiny. Clara could see him processing the scene, taking in the unusual sight of a Falcon on her porch. She stepped forward, raising her hands in a placating gesture. Officer, I know this looks odd, Clara started, trying to suppress her nervous laughter. But I found this falcon on my porch. It has a teddy bear. She gestured towards the bird, who had momentarily relaxed its grip on the toy, as if considering its options. Ma'am, are you saying that the falcon found a toy and you called us? Officer Martinez asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Clara felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She quickly backtracked, wanting to clarify. No. I mean, yes, but it's not just about the toy. I thought it might have been in distress. I called you because I didn't know what to do. She glanced back at the falcon, hoping it would provide some sort of confirmation to her frantic explanation. Is it aggressive? The officer inquired, taking a cautious step closer. His gaze shifted from the falcon to Clara, assessing her demeanor. You said it was in distress? Clara shook her head vigorously. No, it seems fine now. But I was worried because it just landed here out of nowhere. I didn't know if it was hurt or lost. Officer Martinez knelt down slowly, trying to gauge the falcon's behavior. Clara held her breath as she watched him move, half expecting the bird to take off or act defensively. Instead, the falcon merely tilted its head, its keen eyes observing the officer with a calm curiosity. I'm not sure what it's doing here, Officer Martinez murmured, his gaze fixed on the bird. But it doesn't look injured. It's probably just curious. Curious? Clara echoed, still feeling the weight of the situation. I mean, it came to my porch with a teddy bear. That's not something you see every day. Just then, as if to emphasize her point, the falcon flapped its wings, momentarily startling everyone. It lifted off the railing, soared a few feet into the air, and then landed back down with a soft thud, clutching the toy tightly. Clara chuckled nervously, and Officer Martinez smiled slightly, the tension breaking just a bit. Okay, so it's not a danger to anyone, he conceded, standing up straight. But we might want to check if it has an owner. He took out his phone to radio for assistance, explaining the situation. Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. She hadn't imagined the officer would be so understanding. Maybe someone nearby lost it, she suggested, glancing around her yard as if expecting a distraught owner to come rushing back. I'd hate for it to be alone. Let's hope so, Officer Martinez replied, his focus shifting back to the falcon. Birds of prey can often travel long distances, especially if they're searching for food or a nesting site. Clara felt a sense of camaraderie forming with the officer. They were both in this strange situation together, trying to figure out the mystery of the falcon and its attachment to the plush toy. Do you think it was abandoned? She asked, her curiosity piqued. Maybe, Officer Martinez mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Or perhaps it was simply playing. Some birds are known to pick up shiny objects or toys for fun. Playing? Clara echoed, her eyes widening in surprise. So this falcon might just think that teddy bear is a game? Possibly, he replied, chuckling softly. It's not uncommon for animals to engage in playful behavior, especially if they're feeling comfortable in their surroundings. At that moment, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of her yard. Mr. Jenkins, the local wildlife expert, had come to see what was happening. Clara's heart leaped at the sight of him. Mr. Jenkins, she called out, waving her arms in excitement. You've got to see this. Is there a problem, Clara? He asked, approaching with an air of authority. I got a call about a falcon causing a disturbance. It's not a disturbance, she exclaimed, pointing at the bird. It found a teddy bear and landed here. Mr. Jenkins crouched down, eyes narrowing as he inspected the scene. A falcon, you say? That's quite unusual. What's it doing with a toy? We were just talking about that, Officer Martinez said, gesturing to the bird. Seems like it's taken a liking to this teddy bear. We're trying to figure out if it belongs to someone nearby. Interesting, Mr. Jenkins said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Falcons are fascinating creatures. They're often very curious and intelligent. He glanced back at the falcon, who was now inspecting the teddy bear with keen interest, as if trying to decide its next move. Just then, Clara had an idea. What if we try to coax it into flying back to its nest or wherever it came from? Maybe it's just lost. That might be worth a shot, Mr. Jenkins replied, clearly intrigued by her suggestion. We could use some bait to lure it. Bait? Clara asked, puzzled. What kind of bait? Something it might find appealing, he explained, looking around the yard. Small pieces of meat, perhaps, or even something shiny that catches its eye. Clara's mind raced, and she glanced around for any food items she might have in the kitchen. I think I have some leftover chicken in the fridge. Would that work? Absolutely. Let's give it a try, Mr. Jenkins said, his enthusiasm infectious. Clara dashed inside her house, adrenaline pumping as she rummaged through the fridge, grabbing a small container of shredded chicken. When she returned, the Falcon still sat perched on the railing, observing the chaos with calm curiosity. Clara held out a piece of chicken, her heart pounding as she approached. Come on, big guy, she coaxed gently. Look what I have for you. The Falcon shifted its weight, eyeing the food with interest. Clara's breath caught in her throat as it hopped closer, drawn by the scent. I can't believe this is working, she whispered, glancing at Mr. Jenkins and Officer Martinez, who were both watching intently. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Be careful, Clara, Officer Martinez cautioned, still keeping a safe distance. You don't want to startle it. I know, Clara said, trying to steady her hand as she extended the chicken piece further. The Falcon hesitated for a moment, its keen eyes locked onto the offering. Then, with a quick flap of its wings, it lunged forward, grabbing the chicken from her fingers. Wow! Clara exclaimed, her heart racing. It actually took it. Yes. Mr. Jenkins cheered, his excitement palpable. Now we can use this to coax it further. With the Falcon now engaged, they quickly devised a plan to guide it toward a nearby tree, where it might feel more at home. Clara sprinkled more chicken on the ground leading toward the tree, her hands shaking with excitement. Come on, buddy, she encouraged softly, watching the Falcon eagerly peck at the pieces of food. As the Falcon moved closer to the tree, Clara felt a wave of hope wash over her. It was as if they were all part of a team, working together to help the magnificent bird find its way home. I can't believe this is actually happening, she whispered to herself, beaming with pride. With each piece of chicken, the Falcon followed closer, and Clara's heart raced with anticipation. Would it take flight? Would it return to its nest? The community, led by the police and wildlife experts, watched in awe as they participated in this unexpected rescue mission. Finally, with one last piece of chicken in hand, Clara gestured toward the tree, encouraging the Falcon. Go on. You can do it, she cheered, feeling the energy of everyone around her. The Falcon hesitated for a moment, then took a leap of faith, flapping its majestic wings as it soared upward. Cheers erupted from the small gathering, and Clara felt a rush of joy. It did it. It really did it, she exclaimed, her heart swelling with happiness. As the Falcon landed on a sturdy branch, it turned its head, as if acknowledging the small crowd below. Clara waved at it, feeling a sense of connection with the magnificent creature. Goodbye, buddy. Safe travels. In that moment, everything felt right. The fear and anxiety that had gripped her earlier evaporated, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and community. They had worked together to help a creature in need, and in doing so, they had strengthened their bonds with one another. Officer Martinez turned to Clara with a smile. You did great today. Thanks for being so quick to call us. Yeah, Clara. You saved the day. Mr. Jenkins added, beaming with pride. Clara couldn't help but feel a rush of gratitude for everyone who had come together in this unexpected adventure. As the crowd began to disperse, Clara felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. She had not only aided in the rescue of a beautiful falcon but had also found a renewed sense of purpose in her community. The day had started with fear and uncertainty, but it ended with connection, teamwork, and a little bit of magic. With the sun beginning to set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of many more adventures to come. She knew that with her love for wildlife and her community by her side, she would continue to make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. As Clara stood by, watching Officer Daniels cautiously approach the Falcon, a mix of anxiety and curiosity bubbled within her. The crowd surrounding her whispered among themselves, intrigued by the unfolding drama. Clara felt a twinge of embarrassment, realizing how absurd the whole situation seemed. Just moments ago, she was terrified that a wild animal might attack her, and now she was witnessing an unexpected encounter between a trained officer and a bird of prey over a stuffed toy. Officer Daniels knelt down slowly, his eyes fixed on the Falcon. "You've got to be calm, buddy. We're not here to hurt you," he spoke softly, his voice smooth and soothing. Clara noticed how the officer's demeanor seemed to change the atmosphere. Even the onlookers grew quieter, captivated by the moment. She felt the tension easing from her chest, replaced by a sense of wonder at how nature and humanity were intertwining right before her eyes. The Falcon, still gripping the plush toy tightly in its talons, shifted its weight slightly, eyeing Officer Daniels with an intensity that was both beautiful and intimidating. Clara held her breath, her heart racing as she considered the possibility that the Falcon might not be willing to give up its prize so easily. Would it remain stubborn, perhaps even aggressive? Just then, a curious child in the crowd piped up, "Why does it have that toy?" Clara turned to see a little girl, no older than 6, with wide eyes and an expression of sheer fascination. The question hung in the air, and Clara pondered it herself. "Maybe it thinks it's food," she mused, though she knew it was unlikely. The Falcon's predatory instincts would typically lead it to hunt smaller creatures, not snatch up toys from the ground. Officer Daniels smiled at the girl's question, appreciating her innocent curiosity. "That's a good question. Falcons are known to collect shiny or interesting items, often to line their nests. This little guy might just think the toy is something special," he explained, never breaking his focus on the bird. Clara felt a sense of relief wash over her. If Officer Daniels could speak so casually, perhaps the Falcon wasn't as dangerous as she initially thought. The crowd leaned in closer, hanging on to Officer Daniels' every word. Clara could sense a shift in the atmosphere. People were no longer viewing the Falcon as a threat, but as a part of nature that deserved respect and understanding. It was fascinating how quickly perceptions could change, and she realized she was learning something valuable right there on her porch. Suddenly, the Falcon ruffled its feathers, seeming to contemplate its next move. Clara's heart skipped a beat as she worried about whether it might take off or lash out. "You're doing great, buddy," Officer Daniels continued, maintaining that calm demeanor that seemed to suit the bird. He pulled a small piece of raw chicken from his pocket, holding it out with his hand extended. "I've got a treat for you," he said softly. The Falcon's attention shifted toward the officer's hand, and for a moment, Clara held her breath. The bird's sharp gaze flicked from the officer to the toy and back to the food, weighing its options. "Come on," Officer Daniels urged, his voice steady. "You can have this instead." Just as the crowd seemed to collectively lean forward, the Falcon took a step toward Officer Daniels, its talons gripping the railing. Clara could see the muscles in the bird's legs flex as it shifted, its body poised between the two options, the toy it had claimed as its own and the food that could sustain it. This moment felt like a standoff, a silent battle of wills that captivated everyone present. Then, in a swift motion that took Clara by surprise, the Falcon dropped the plush toy and lunged for the piece of chicken. The crowd gasped, and Clara clapped her hands over her mouth, her heart racing in disbelief. "Did you see that?" someone exclaimed in awe. Officer Daniels chuckled softly, a mix of relief and amusement washing over his face. "Good choice. See? It was just a little hungry." He gently tossed a piece of chicken to the Falcon, which caught it mid-air with an impressive display of grace and agility. The crowd erupted into applause, a wave of appreciation washing over them as they witnessed the Falcon's prowess. With the distraction of the food, the Falcon now had its focus on the meal rather than its earlier possession. Clara couldn't help but feel relieved. the tension had lifted entirely. Watching the majestic bird devour its prize, she felt a newfound admiration for its wild instincts and beauty. The officer had handled the situation beautifully, turning potential chaos into a teachable moment for everyone present. "Okay, buddy," Officer Daniels said as he prepared to step back. "Now let's get you somewhere safe." He slowly approached the Falcon again, who was busy enjoying its meal, seemingly content. Clara's heart swelled with pride, not just for the officer's skill, but also for Buddy, the dog who had initiated this unexpected adventure. If it weren't for him, the baby would likely have remained in danger, and the Falcon would not have received the help it needed. As the crowd began to disperse, Clara felt a sense of gratitude for the experience. The earlier fear she had felt had transformed into a moment of community connection and learning. Everyone had come together, united by their concern for the baby and the Falcon, and they had witnessed something special. "Thank you for coming to help," Clara called out to Officer Daniels as he stood, carefully observing the Falcon's actions. "I really appreciate how you handled everything." The officer smiled, his demeanor warm and friendly. "It's my job to protect and serve, but it's always a bonus when we can save 2 lives in one day." His eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. "And to think I got to see a dog in action too." Clara chuckled, glancing over at Buddy, who was now basking in the glow of admiration from the remaining crowd. "He's a hero in his own right," she said proudly, kneeling down to give Buddy a scratch behind the ears. The golden retriever leaned into her affection, looking utterly pleased with himself. With the situation under control, Officer Daniels began to discuss what the next steps would be for the Falcon. "We'll need to contact animal control to ensure it's safely relocated. It's not common for falcons to be found in suburban areas, and they should be in their natural habitat." Clara nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and concern. "Will it be okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Absolutely. Falcons are resilient creatures. As long as it's returned to the wild, it should do just fine," Officer Daniels reassured her. "But for now, it looks like it's found a little snack." As he continued to talk about the Falcon's care, Clara took a moment to reflect on how quickly a day could change. One moment, she was tending to her garden in peace, and the next, she was witnessing an incredible rescue. The power of nature had once again reminded her of life's unpredictable beauty. Just as Officer Daniels wrapped up his conversation, a nearby child pointed up at the sky. "Look! The Falcon is flying." The crowd turned their attention to the sky as the Falcon soared above them, wings spread wide, gliding gracefully through the air. Clara felt a sense of awe wash over her as she watched it ascend, free and powerful. "That's incredible," someone shouted. "It's beautiful." "Nature really is amazing," Clara said softly, feeling a swell of gratitude for the day's events. The Falcon was back where it belonged, and she couldn't help but feel hopeful for the future. As the crowd began to disperse, Clara felt a new connection to her community. They had all shared in this extraordinary experience, and she could see the impact it had made on everyone present. "Thank you all for being here," she called out to the departing neighbors. "I really appreciate it." "Anytime," someone shouted back with a smile. "You never know what kind of adventure a day in the park will bring." As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the park, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of peace. With Buddy by her side and the memories of the day etched in her heart, she knew this was a story she would tell for years to come. It was a reminder of the beauty of community, the power of nature, and the importance of looking out for one another. Clara took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp evening air, and decided to take Buddy for a stroll around the park. "Let's go, Buddy," she said, motioning for him to follow her. As they walked together, she felt grateful for the unexpected adventure that had brought them closer together. With each step, Clara reflected on how important it was to cherish moments like these. They were reminders of the extraordinary connections that could form when people came together in times of need. She had learned that even a small act of kindness, like Buddy finding the Falcon, could create ripples of change in the community. As they made their way home, Clara vowed to continue nurturing her love for nature and her commitment to her community. She wanted to inspire others to appreciate the beauty around them and to always be vigilant in looking out for those in need. With Buddy trotting happily beside her, Clara felt ready to embrace whatever new adventures awaited them in the future. Life was unpredictable, but she knew that with love and compassion, they could tackle anything that came their way. As the police car came to a halt, the siren's wail faded, replaced by the buzzing whispers of the gathered crowd. Clara felt a mix of anxiety and excitement bubbling inside her as Officer Daniels, a sturdy man with kind eyes, stepped out of the vehicle. He adjusted his hat and approached the scene, his expression shifting from confusion to curiosity as he noticed the massive Falcon perched on Clara's porch. "Ma'am, can you tell me what's going on?" he asked, his voice calm and authoritative. Clara took a deep breath, her heart racing. "There's a falcon on my porch, and it has something in its talons," she explained, gesturing toward the bird. "I thought it might be a danger to me or my neighbors. I didn't know what to do." Officer Daniels nodded, taking in the scene. He squinted at the falcon, who stood tall, puffing out its chest as if to assert its dominance over the situation. The bird's sharp eyes flicked between Clara and the officer, its talons gripping the plush toy tightly. Clara felt a sense of dread wash over her. What if the officer made it angry? "Okay, let's take a closer look," Officer Daniels said, kneeling down to observe the falcon from a safe distance. Clara watched anxiously as he pulled out a pair of gloves from his pocket. "It's important that we handle this carefully. Birds of prey can be very protective of their territory, especially when they feel threatened." He approached slowly, speaking softly, trying to ease the tension in the air. "Hey there, Buddy. You've got a nice prize there," he murmured, pointing to the toy. Clara's heart pounded as she took a step back, still unsure how this would play out. Would the officer be able to coax the bird into letting go? As he knelt closer, Clara noticed the crowd had grown. Neighbors, curious children, and passers-by had gathered, all drawn in by the unusual sight. "Look at that bird," a young boy exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's huge." "Stay back, everyone," Officer Daniels warned, keeping his focus on the falcon. "We don't want to startle it." The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone watched, breathless, as the officer assessed the situation. Clara could feel her pulse racing, the stakes rising higher with each moment. "Do you think it will attack?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never seen a bird like this up close." "Not if it feels safe," Officer Daniels replied, glancing over his shoulder at her. "But it's important to give it space. Right now, it's more interested in that toy than in us." Taking a deep breath, Clara tried to calm her nerves. She had read about birds of prey and how they could be fierce when protecting their territory, but she had never expected to find herself in a situation like this. "All right, let's see if we can encourage it to release the toy," Officer Daniels said, standing up to retrieve a piece of raw chicken from his pocket. Clara's eyes widened. "You brought raw chicken?" The officer chuckled softly. "Always prepared. It's a common technique to coax birds like this one. Hopefully, we can trade the toy for a snack." Clara's heart raced as she watched Officer Daniels carefully wave the chicken in front of the falcon. "Here, Buddy. I've got something tasty for you." The falcon's eyes flickered from the toy to the piece of meat, its curiosity piqued. Clara held her breath, the crowd silent as they watched the standoff unfold. For a moment, the falcon seemed torn between its prized possession and the tempting offer of food. Clara could see its feathers ruffling slightly, and she hoped it would make the right choice. "Come on, you can do it," she whispered, almost willing the bird to cooperate. Slowly, the falcon shifted its weight, and with a determined stare, it released its grip on the plush toy. The crowd collectively gasped, and Clara felt her heart lift as she realized the officer's strategy was working. The falcon hopped closer to the chicken, and Clara's worry faded away. "Good job," Officer Daniels encouraged, slowly extending the piece of meat toward the falcon. "That's it. You're doing great." The falcon seized the opportunity and took the chicken, its beak snapping quickly as it devoured the food. Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Clara felt a surge of relief wash over her. "You did it," she exclaimed, a grin spreading across her face. As the bird turned its attention to its meal, Officer Daniels carefully picked up the plush toy. "Looks like we have a happy ending," he said, holding it up for the crowd to see. "Now we just need to make sure this Falcon gets back to where it belongs." With the toy in one hand and the other still cautiously holding the chicken, Officer Daniels moved back to give the Falcon some space. The majestic bird finished its meal and looked around, seemingly satisfied. Clara stepped forward, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you for handling that so well," she said, gratitude evident in her voice. "I really didn't know what to do." "It's all in a day's work," Officer Daniels replied with a smile, but Clara could see the glint of respect in his eyes. "Just remember, wildlife can be unpredictable, but with a little patience, we can usually find a solution." As the Falcon continued to feast on the chicken, the crowd began to disperse, their excitement lingering in the air. Clara couldn't believe how the day had turned out. What started as a moment of panic had transformed into a beautiful display of cooperation between humans and nature. "Do you think it will fly away soon?" she asked, looking at the officer. "Once it finishes eating, it will likely take off," he assured her. "These birds are incredibly capable. They'll know where they belong." Clara nodded, feeling a sense of calm washing over her. The Falcon had come into her life as a whirlwind, but it was clear now that nature had a way of finding balance. She glanced at the toy in Officer Daniels' hand, grateful that the day had ended well. After a few more moments of watching the Falcon, it finally seemed satisfied with its meal. With a powerful flap of its wings, the bird took off into the sky, soaring high above the trees. Clara gasped in awe as she watched the Falcon glide effortlessly, its wings catching the sunlight. "Look at it go," a child shouted, pointing upwards. The crowd erupted in cheers, their joy echoing through the park as they marveled at the sight. Clara felt tears of happiness prick her eyes. This experience had shown her the strength of community and the importance of respecting nature. As the last remnants of the Falcon faded from view, Officer Daniels turned to Clara. "I think you handled yourself remarkably well during all of this," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Not everyone would have known to call for help." Clara blushed at the compliment. "I didn't know what else to do. I just knew I had to act quickly." "And that's what matters," he replied, a proud smile on his face. "Remember, if you ever encounter something like this again, don't hesitate to reach out for help." Clara nodded, feeling empowered. "I will. Thank you so much for coming out and helping." After Officer Daniels wrapped up his conversation and checked in with the remaining bystanders, he turned to leave. "You take care now, and keep an eye out for any more unexpected visitors," he joked with a wink before heading back to his patrol car. As Clara walked back toward her house, she felt a sense of accomplishment. The day had started with confusion and fear, but it had ended with a sense of unity and triumph. She thought about how a simple phone call had changed everything and how important it was to reach out for help when needed. Later that evening, Clara sat on her porch with a cup of tea, reflecting on the day's events. She couldn't help but smile as she replayed the scene in her mind: the Falcon's powerful wings, Officer Daniels' calm demeanor, and the community's collective support. In the following days, Clara decided to share her experience on social media, wanting to raise awareness about wildlife encounters and the importance of responding appropriately. She wrote about her fears and how she had turned to the community for help. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. To her surprise, the post resonated with many people, sparking conversations about similar encounters. Messages began pouring in from friends and strangers alike, each sharing their stories and expressing gratitude for her initiative. Clara felt a sense of connection with everyone who reached out, and it fueled her desire to continue advocating for wildlife awareness in her community. As time went on, Clara organized a small community event at the park, inviting wildlife experts to talk about how to interact safely with animals and what to do in emergencies. The turnout was impressive, with families and children eager to learn. On the day of the event, Clara felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she set up booths and arranged seating. She looked around at the smiling faces of her neighbors, feeling proud of what she had accomplished. "Thank you all for coming," she began, addressing the crowd. "Today, we're here to learn how to coexist with our wonderful wildlife and ensure we can all enjoy our beautiful park safely." The experts shared stories and tips, and the audience was engaged, asking questions and sharing their own experiences. Clara watched as children laughed and played, all while learning important lessons about respecting nature. As the day wrapped up, Clara felt a sense of fulfillment. She had turned her fear and uncertainty into a positive force, bringing her community together to learn and grow. The Falcon had not only changed her day but had also inspired a movement toward awareness and cooperation. That evening, as Clara relaxed on her porch, she spotted a bird soaring overhead. She couldn't help but smile, feeling grateful for the experiences that had shaped her and the community around her. Life had a funny way of surprising her, but in every twist and turn, she found beauty, connection, and purpose. From that day forward, Clara knew she would always be ready to help, just as the Falcon had helped her. She had learned the importance of reaching out for support and the value of community, knowing that together, they could face whatever challenges life threw their way. And if you like the story, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell.